Hey everybody, welcome to the session. I'm Ethan Lieber, the CEO of Latchel, here with my co-founder and COO, Will Gordon. Welcome, Will, as always. Well, not always, but often. We have a guest today, Keenan Williams, co-founder and president of Rezi, R-E-Z-I, Rezi. They're a fellow Y Combinator-backed company made for landlords and tenants to rent faster and more seamlessly. While he's helping tenants and landlords rent faster and more seamlessly, Will and I are going to start the crowdcast here by talking about Y Combinator, the application process, how that works, what types of companies they look for. In case no one caught that, Keenan's running a little bit late. So we're going to preface by talking about Y Combinator. Latchel is also a Y Combinator-backed company. We get a lot of questions about what Y Combinator is like. What was that process like? What did they look for? What kind of companies come out of YC? YC being a short for Y Combinator. So we're going to start by talking about that. Keenan's going to be jumping in a little bit late, but then when Keenan jumps in, we're going to dig into Rezi and their Y Combinator experience and what Rezi does to help landlords and tenants. So let's kick off. Let's start by maybe defining the type of companies that Y Combinator typically looks for. Will, I'm going to pass it off to you. What kind of company does YC look for?
So I wish I had a complete magic ball and understood everything, because they really do run the gamut from technology companies like software on web software companies to like other kind of moonshot things. There was a company that was building jetpacks, another company that was building boats that went really, really fast, another company that was building rockets or rocket launching systems with hot air balloons. So it really goes the complete game. Oh, there was also like food and beverage companies too were also inside of Y Combinator. So they're really looking for just interesting.
Of course, you
founders.
had your standard software companies too.
Yeah.
Runs the gamut for sure.
Yeah, they definitely have a big focus, I've noticed, on business-to-business software as a service companies. Latchel is one of those. We're not pure software as a service. We also have a managed service that we provide to our clients. But that is, I'd say, the bulk of the companies. But you shouldn't count yourself out. If it's any really interesting idea with interesting founders and it's a new take on the market, they'll look for you. But I do think within that list, there was still a few things that every company had in common. Would you agree, Ethan? Like everyone had some common themes?
I think there were a few things that were very common that you could kind of pick out immediately. And when I think about what types of companies go through Y Combinator, it became less about, oh, they're B2C or they're B2B or they're software, they're tech, they're, this or that. It wasn't vertical specific either. It became much more about the common threads for what they deem as necessary for high growth and success. And one of the things that I noticed, and we talk about this a lot, Will, that was common among all companies is what we call product founder fit. Can you talk a little bit about what product founder fit means?
Yeah, so a lot of people that are in the technology space know about product market fit, where you are selling a product to a particular market and there's just this linking and synchronicity between the two. People want the product's working well, you're getting high growth. But product founder fit comes before that. With every single company we met at Y Combinator, every single one of the founding teams had a deep connection to the product that they were building or the particular problem that they were solving. For us, my family has multiple generations going back in real estate and property management. Ethan's previous role was in contractor lead gen marketplaces, hooking up contractors and landlord or homeowners. So there definitely was product founder fit for us. But for all the other companies that we talked to, there's also like really insane amounts of product founder fit. Remember, one company was building software for packaging manufacturers. The founder comes from a family that owned small package manufacturing.
He basically grew up in a package manufacturer factory. Like,
yeah, from like
perfect
age 11.
founder fit.
Yeah, another one was a clothing designer, and she was building like custom couture clothing via software tools, but it was also like extremely strong product founder fit. And this was universal across the board. The only exceptions that I ever saw to this rule, which weren't so much exceptions as much as like, okay, how really is that person like perfectly connected, is more cases where it was a Y Combinator alumni who had actually been through Y Combinator before on a different product, and they really enjoyed working with them, and they're coming back for a new startup idea.
My sense for why YC looked for that strong product founder fit is that it sometimes was indicative of whether or not that person was going to be able to find something not intuitive but insightful about the industry, like the new insight that was different than what anyone else had seen. And I think maybe that was the second thing that was common among all companies. There was some insight that they had.
That was absolutely universally true. Everyone had something that they understood about their market that was different from how the rest of anyone else approaching that same problem understood it. And a lot of that product founder fit allows people to look beyond just simply the technology problem or the business problem, and understands people's psychology maybe a little bit more, or understands some difficulties with market penetration or growth that other people don't understand because they're not as closely tied to that market.
Yeah. I mean, to speak a little bit about to what we do, I think one of the interesting things we noticed about maintenance coordination was that it was just as important to know what happened in the journey of a work order or a maintenance request. That was just as important as what the outcome was. Mm-hmm. Meaning, if you had a great outcome and cool, work order got done, it was just as important to know how it ended up from getting submitted to done as it was that it got done. Similarly, just because a work order maybe didn't get completed perfectly, there's always like bumps in the road. It was more important that you had documentation showing exactly where those bumps were and how it got there than avoiding bad outcomes altogether. It's not about avoiding bad outcomes, right? It's about like mitigating that risk and being transparent with how things got to where they are, so it's obvious what needs to be done.
Yeah, there's also some interesting, unique insights that companies had about go-to-market strategy. A lot of companies in the property management space try to either go too small or too large. The traditional software solution is to go to the really big businesses first. People with tens of thousands, if not close to 100,000 units under management, solve their problems because they're big whales. Or other people go the extreme other end of the spectrum and go to small landlords, because with just like one or two units. Latchel has a different tactic. We go towards the middle, and we're expanding from that middle.
But I think too, in a way, the insight is just how underserved
that middle
our
is.
Customers are. Yeah, not that mid-market range. You're not managing 15,000 units of multifamily communities. You're also not the DIY landlord. You fit this middle range of, maybe you're a startup and you're at 20 units working your way up to 50 or 100, or maybe you're even at a few thousand units in your portfolio. The other unique insight was that single family is a massive opportunity, right?
And grossly underserved.
All the big software companies, I mean, look at like Yardi, RealPage. It wasn't until really recently they even started looking at is there opportunity in single family, right?
Yeah, most players in the software space go to multifamily first. It's mainly because that's where the big money, big dollar contracts are, and it's really hard to get down to that mass market appeal once you've done that very customized solutions for these very big players. So yeah, Latchel's a bit different for how we do that, and I think that has a lot to say about why we've been able to grow the way we have over the past now 15 months since launching that emergency service.
Yeah. I think there were two other things too that were common, maybe not universal, but very common among the companies going through YC. The third was there was a strong cohesion and
The founding team?
harmony,
Yeah.
maybe would be the right way to put it, a harmony with the founding team. Obviously we're able to jump into a podcast like this, Will, and just kind of jive. Like there's some chemistry, right? Chemistry or harmony between the way we work together. And I think most of the other founding teams had that.
Yeah. It was very rare to have founders that were had just met each other before starting the business. It was also very rare to have solo founders as well with companies. It's not to say that there weren't any. There definitely were. There's exceptions to every single rule out there, but almost every single team we interacted with had just extremely high levels of cohesion and understanding and support and camaraderie among the two team members, or 2 or 3, however many founders. Usually there weren't more than 3 founders. Most teams were 2 to 4 founders, probably with 2 to 3 being the sweet spot.
And if you're watching this and you've listened to our podcast before, we don't mention him much because he likes lurking in the shadows coding. But we do have a third co-founder, Julian, who went through Y Combinator with us. He's our technical co-founder, and he's written the probably 95% of the code in our application. He's touched almost everything. And Julian has built most of the application, and the 3 of us had very different skill sets, communicate harmoniously but differently, and so it was a good pairing there. There's a fourth thing, and this is probably the last thing that I noticed as a common thread, and this was probably the least important in some ways, because a lot of companies going through Y Combinator don't necessarily even know what their product's going to be or haven't really found product market fit. But YC does look for a history of the founders being able to rapidly experiment and show that historical trend of being effective.
Yeah. So the easy way to see that is some interesting metric that's moving in a interesting direction and getting better over time. But that's for the more established companies. There's another theme that works for the less established companies, or anyone with any idea, that I think just applies to any person who's trying to better themselves, whether it's their business, whether it's themselves personally, professionally, however else it goes. And it relates to that ability to rapidly iterate and change and experiment and work on something new. There was a story that's, it's a public story about this company that basically, I wouldn't say schmoozed their way, but they just constantly had opportunities opened up for them. Or at least that's what it looks like. People were just bending over backwards, opening doors for them, trying to make exceptions. And when you dig into the story, you realize it wasn't so much that people were opening doors for them as much as they were earning that seat at the table. They were just working incredibly hard to deserve that spot and have people root for them. That company was Airbnb. They tried tons and tons of different things before it even became Airbnb. It was Air Bed and Breakfast even before it was Airbnb. They got into Y Combinator, went through the program. A lot of it seems like it was by the skin of their teeth, or with exceptions being made, or doors being opened. But when you talk to the people who were mentoring them, it became very clear and obvious why they stretched so hard for them. It's because they'd constantly come back to their mentors with, hey, thank you for that advice. We tried all that. We tried more things, and here's what happened. Here's what worked. Here's what didn't work. Now we're stuck again. Can you help us some more? And it's just so gratifying for the mentors to see that their advice actually got put into place, that this team is working so hard and trying so many different things. Of course you're going to root for them. Of course you're going to try to make anything happen for them. I challenge anyone in this audience to think about a time you've had someone come to you asking for mentorship or for help, and how disappointing it was if you've given them that advice and asked for that help, and when they ask for the help, and then they come back a few weeks later and they haven't actually tried any of what you what you said, and it doesn't seem like they really made progress. They're just coming back to you looking for what? Validation of their ideas? Or are they really trying to like move their business forward or move themselves forward personally? I saw with every single founder at Y Combinator that they took advice very seriously. They took feedback in stride and improved upon it, and then iterated, and then would come back being like, I tried this and I tried 5 other things and now I'm stuck again. Please, what can you recommend? What can I do differently?
And I think it helps to kind of talk a little bit about the format of YC. It's formatted in a way where every 2 weeks you're getting together as a group, and each company in these small groups, maybe like, I don't know, 6 to 10 people. I don't actually remember how large our group was. Maybe it was like 8 or something. But each group talks about what they've done the last 2 weeks, what their progress is, the things they've experimented with. Now, even outside of those 2 weeks, you might have like one-on-ones where you're getting advice. You're coming back to the partners, the advisors, talking about here's the things we're trying, or other founders even. That's part of the whole community, right? There's this large community of other founders that are really smart, and even though they're working on maybe different things than you're working on, they're going to have great feedback for you. And whether it was you going to the partners, advisors, or other founders, the environment is set up in a way where the people that succeed take that mentorship, that advice to heart and act on it quickly. It's not about having an idea and taking 2 weeks to get that idea ready and then taking the next 2 weeks to see if the idea works. It's about having an idea, implementing something in a couple days to start testing that, and then a couple days later digging through all the data. And even that 5-day cycle that I just kind of threw out there was probably too slow.
Yeah, you can try.
He probably actually wanted to do smaller things, over 48 hours, 72 hours. But these are things like anyone can apply to their business. It's not just about, are you a startup? Is it a new idea? You can apply this philosophy to what new digital marketing am I going to try this week to see if I can get more leads? What am I going to try this week to improve, my operating efficiency or whatever it is?
I think one of the interesting things with the Y Combinator format, they're mostly young companies, not entirely young companies, but mostly young companies. I would consider Latchel at 2 years old when we got in. It was roughly 2 years old as a company.
Like 1.5 years, but yeah, what's the difference?
Yeah, at that point we were an older company coming into Y Combinator. There were a few companies that were even older than us, but not too many. And it was a very large batch size. Was it close to 200? It wasn't. I can't remember exactly.
Like that, yeah.
It was around 200 total companies. So with Latchel being probably of the oldest 20 to 30 companies, it's definitely up there. But part of the reason for that is this rapid iteration and change. It's really hard to do that when you're a very large company because there's so much change management, communication that you have to do, bring people along. So if you're trying to apply this to your company and you have a larger team, think of it in smaller modules. Like Ethan just mentioned, digital marketing as a single place. That would be a great place if you only have 2 or 3 team members to just try and experiment tons of different things. It probably isn't such a great place to change your whole leasing department if you have 20 leasing agents. Maybe you want to take a small segment of that and have that be your rapid innovation hub and not just mess with people's lives and processes too rapidly every single day. It just causes too much churn and loses trust.
And I think the thing with Y Combinator is it's an accelerator. It's meant to accelerate the growth. And so it's all focused around that growth acceleration. So a lot of, if you're going through Y Combinator, a lot of what you talk about is, what do I do to grow faster? And unless you hit like a major operational roadblock, the focus is growth, which changes the way you think about the business. any business, even a property management business, which is more operational, more cumbersome in a lot of ways. You can't fly as fast, right, or grow as fast as a software company that can just sell, and not have to worry about, do I need to hire more people? Like, you only need to hire more people if you're building more features that you need to support, right? But I think it's instructive because if you have to think about, how do I go from, I'm just going to call it 100 units for this example. If you're forced into a mindset of thinking, how do I go from 100 units to 200 units next week to 400 units the week after that, this is like super rapid growth, right? I mean, the real metric you probably would want to target is something closer to 10% growth each week. But if I'm at 100 units, okay, so next week I'm at 110. Week after that, I'm 121. Week after that, I'm like, what, 133? The week after that, I'm at 170. So in a month, I went from 100 units to 100. I almost doubled in a month. But that's the mindset that it requires to figure out, how do I really scale this company and grow it? So you imagine 180 companies in this 3-month time period, all trying to figure out, how do we do that? How do we do that 10% week over week growth, right?
Yeah, and it's a very different problem as well when you're a brand new company in the technology space versus a more established company in like more managed service, like property management or laterals type situation. It becomes less of a product market fit journey and more of a, am I messaging my service the right way? Do I have the right sales cycle or sales strategy? Am I talking to people and highlighting the right benefits the right way? When you're a slightly more established company, or you have a very clear service offering and you're not trying to invent what this brand new product is, it becomes much more of like a theory of constraints type focus. What is the one thing holding me back right now? And how do I solve that thing over the next week? And then the next week after I've solved that, figure out that next piece that's holding it back. If you're a property management company trying to get 10% week over week growth, is it having new prospects to talk to? That probably, very likely, I'd imagine for most property management companies, that might be the biggest single constraint. So how do you get in front of more people that are qualified? Solve that problem. Then once you have that problem solved, are you closing them at a high enough rate? Yes or no? Okay, solve that problem. Then now you have like an onboarding process. Are you doing that right? Are you serving them properly? It's quite a few steps away from having a perfect operation. It's a few steps of this journey and iteration before it becomes like, okay, I figured out how to grow. Now that I figured out how to grow, how do I grow scalably becomes your next challenge.
Yeah. I think we've almost got Keenan in, and it'll be really cool to hear about his experience with Y Combinator and a little bit more about Rezi. Before we bring Keenan on, anything that you think we missed about YC's format that you think is relevant, Will?
The other great thing about the format, I just want to reiterate that founder network. It's more than just what you're learning from the people that are running the program. It's more about the peer group that you've been able to put yourself in. And that peer group lasts beyond the program. I'm still in very frequent communication, talk a few times a week, at least via text message, to other people that were in our batch. And I think as a business owner, before Y Combinator, I struggled to find a peer group that would keep me accountable, that would have the same mindset mentality of like, we need this really rapid growth. We need to build a scalable, huge business, and then be rooting for each other. I was very lucky. It was only like a month or two before getting into Y Combinator that I found that group in Seattle. But it had been close to 2 years. It had been about 1.5 years of searching and trying to find the right group, trying different groups on before I finally had that. So even if you're not going through a program like that, you can get most of the benefits just by having really solid peers.
Yeah, and there's a lot of great kind of peer groups for property managers. I mean, the one we hear about all the time from our guests is NARPM, an amazing community of people, similar minded, thinking about growth, thinking about scaling their property management companies. There's also Facebook groups you can join. We talk to folks from the Door Grow Club all the time. The Property Management Mastermind group is another good one. And sometimes I think like, you know, these groups can feel like overwhelming because sometimes they're very large. There's a lot of people in them. I think what's more important is carving out that smaller group that you can go deep with. Yeah. Like with us, we had 7 other companies that we were able to have those regular conversations with and go deep, get feedback. And if you can recreate that for your company, like it's invaluable. I mean, you want to make sure you surround yourself with people with similar vision and goals, right? Don't surround yourself with 7 people satisfied with where their company is and coasting, because then you're going to go into coast mode. You know, find the people that are growth driven, thinking about scale, and exchange ideas, and you'll naturally end up scaling with them. I'm a little bit distracted because I'm trying to help with some technical difficulties getting Keenan in here. So we'll see if we can make that work.
So I'll just add to that. I've heard some phrase, I can't even, I don't even know if there's like an attribution, but someone had said that you're the average of the 4 or 5 people you spend the most time with. I don't know how true that is, but I definitely think in terms of business mentorship and peer groups, that is certainly true. If you're surrounding yourself with people that are looking for the a relaxing life now and just creating that work-life balance without wanting to put in the effort and hard work that it takes to get there, you're probably not in the right peer group. If you're looking for that group that's willing to work extremely hard now, you know, maybe for the hope of an easier life in the future, maybe that's okay. Or is it just that growth always mindset? You really need to try to tweak and tune who you surround yourself with so that you're always motivated for the right things.
I think that was Jim Rohn. I was just looking up the exact quote. Jim Rohn, it was, "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." I mean, in this context, who are you spending time with to get business advice, right?
Yeah. Are they necessarily the people that you want to be going? And I've always found it so much more helpful to get advice from people who are right where you are at the same point in the journey or only slightly ahead. It is not very helpful for people that are 2, 3, 4 beyond steps ahead, because it's easy to forget what it was like just even only a few months ago when you're dealing with different problems. You're always very focused on what you're dealing right now in this moment, and
the brain can only store so much information about the past.
Yeah. I've already forgotten how it felt in the very, very early days. I know mistakes that we made, but I'm not living it every single day anymore. So it might come across as like obvious advice in hindsight versus the things that I'm dealing with today, I know aren't intuitive solutions. And when I talk to other people about solutions that we just solved in the past week, it's not always like, oh, that's really obvious. It's sometimes like, oh, that's interesting, I should try that.
Yeah, and I mean, that's not always the case. Like, there's some things you'll always be able to glean. Like, I was talking to a company 2 weeks ago. There are 200 employees and completely remote. Every company's working at like a WeWork office or working from home, and they have 200 employees, right? And I was talking to them about like culture building and things like that. And of course, I got a lot of like awesome insights, but a lot of which, you know, I look at Latchel and I'm like, I don't know how we can even implement this at this current stage. And you can kind of do like digging to say, like, is there a variation of this that works for a company Latchel's size? But there's that disconnect, right? Of like, you don't remember what it was like 2 years ago, going from in property management, going from 100 units to 300. If you're a 2,000 unit company, you don't remember what that was like. In the world you're living in is, how do I go from 2,000 to 10,000? You're thinking about completely different things.
And the ability to redirect your team to work on certain problems is completely different at those different sizes. When Ethan, you say, like, I couldn't even imagine how Latchel would handle, like, or implement certain ideas. Well, at 200 people, you can justify having one person full time just implementing those ideas.
Yeah.
When you're at 20 people and everyone's hustling just to get product out the door, you can't.
Right.
Or it becomes incredibly hard to do that. So yeah, that's why having those mentors and peers that are at the same level or only slightly ahead is just so invaluable.
Yeah. There's I'm going to go to most memorable moment going through Y Combinator. I'm sure maybe ours are the same. But the moment I quote whenever I'm talking with friends, like, what was the most memorable thing that happened, or what was like the biggest game changer?
I'm gonna write down what I think, because I think it's the same thing.
Okay, I'll give you a sec to write it down.
Okay, I wrote it down.
So here's what it was for me. It was the very first group meeting we had, where we were goal setting, and you sit in a circle. Imagine like a group therapy meeting. Everyone's in a circle. You have the partners lined up, and you're going through getting goals. And I don't even remember what goal I said. It was some type of new revenue goal for us, because at that time we were generating revenue. It was like, how do we grow revenue? How do we grow our customer count? And the numbers I'm about to say weren't actually the numbers, because I can't remember at this point, but it'll give you a good idea of how the conversation went. The goal I had set was something around like $2,500 in new revenue for the next 2 weeks. And that was a little bit of a step up from what we were averaging. It was something around 2,500. And Aaron, one of our partners, looked me right in the face and just like unapologetically, just right in the face, as like straight as he could say, told me, if you're only growing $2,000 or $2,500 in new revenue each week, your company will fail. No one will ever want to fund you, and you'll never get anywhere.
And so I wrote, you will fail.
Yeah. So I guess it was the same moment.
Yeah.
But it was like something in the way I thought about the business at that point, like, clicked. It was like it was like wearing glasses suddenly for the first time. For anyone that has glasses, I don't know if you ever. I remember this vividly. I started wearing glasses when I was in middle school, and I walked out of the optometrist, put the glasses on, and was like, "Oh my God, you're supposed to be able to see the individual leaves on the trees." It was like that. It was like things became just so much clearer. But I mean, that's also to say the partners in Y Combinator are amazingly skilled at telling you what you need to hear to overcome whatever challenge you're facing unapologetically. And that does speak to, if you are trying to grow your business, find the mentor that will be unapologetic in what they tell you, because they need to be invested in you overcoming the challenge and not in being
your friend,
nice, or your friend. Like, you don't really want a friend. You want someone that's going to challenge you. I mean, you will become friends with them, of course. That's like naturally what happens. But more importantly, they're looking out for your business, not your ego.
Yeah. There's an interesting thing that I took away from Amazon. Jeff Bezos hates the phrase social cohesion. He absolutely hates it. He thinks it's like a death knell for teams. He doesn't want teams to have social cohesion, and he wanted to design a hiring and recruiting process that de-emphasized social cohesion, was looking for people with strong cultural fit, but didn't care so much that people got along or were nice to each other or friendly. That definitely could lead to some of the more negative press that you've seen around Amazon's culture. But I felt like while I was there, they did a pretty good job with most teams at balancing that. I think the bigger fear with that social cohesion is when the desire to maintain friendly relationships overrides the desire to build a great business. You need people that are willing to say things like, you will fail if you continue down this path, that aren't going to sugarcoat things in a way that maybe you don't even hear them because they've sugarcoated it so much. On the flip side, however, you don't want to go too far in the other direction, especially in a small team, because you have to at least like each other. You have to get along with each other. If you can't handle that kind of direct criticism and feedback, maybe you need to work on that before you start growing a business, because that's going to get in your way very, very quickly. But I noticed that as a very, very small team, if you don't like each other, you're not going to be successful. You have to really like each other. You also have to be mature enough and at least self-confident enough that you can handle that direct, harsh criticism of this is a problem that needs to change. And it's with love, it's with respect, it's with compassion. But truthfully, the most loving, respectful, and compassionate way is to say it straight, and don't try to put up any kind of rose-colored glasses when there's truthfully, excuse my friends, a shit sandwich that you're looking to eat.
Yeah, I do think too. There's maybe a balance, maybe like a counterbalance to it, which is as a founder of your business, as the owner of your business. It's not always about just doing what other people say, right? You just got to kind of do what you believe in. And hey, it looks like we got Keenan here. Apologies for the technical difficulties.
It's all good. I didn't realize I couldn't do it on mobile or without the app or the whole nine. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear
you.
Okay, awesome.
So we were just talking about Y Combinator and the kind of companies that go through it. And so I think by now everyone listening really probably has a deep understanding of the types of companies that go through Y Combinator. So it's going to be really cool now to give a super specific example and talk about Rezi.
Hey.
Maybe you can start, Keenan, actually, by just telling us a little bit about you and how you even started the company. What got you into it?
Yeah. Hold on 1 second. I unfortunately lost my quiet space, so I'm just going to walk down this street into this small entrance here.
And if you're not actually looking at the video and you're only listening, what we're seeing now is Keenan walking through what looks like the busy streets of New York.
Yeah, he just got out of a yellow cab.
I was struggling, and I feel bad because Katrina was trying to help me as best she could over the phone, but I troubleshot my way here, and I also overextended my welcome in the quiet space, so now I have to find a new one, which for everyone who is listening and wants to talk about Y Combinator, this is the type of shit that YC teaches you how to do, just make it work. So I'm going to and take this podcast interview in the lobby of a union building on Manhattan.
That works. That is a YC mentality. Just get it done.
Yeah, just make it work, whatever it takes.
If you have to hack it.
Hack the shit out of it. But yeah, so just to be candid, starting the company, Rezi's my second one. My first one was Closedcom, trying to accelerate the way small balance commercial loans are processed. Said differently, the guy borrowing $2 million, it took as long, or it took the same amount of time to get a $10 million loan or $12 million loan from a bank. And that was just really stupid. I didn't understand why you couldn't power through smaller balances, just like why can't smaller problems be fixed faster than bigger problems? Started out with my buddy. He actually ended up being, who's my co-founder now, he started off being just my investor at the very beginning. When it was time 6 months later to kind of shut it down and pivot, shut it down. We decided to obviously shut it down, but not quit. So we pivoted to a different commercial real estate model one that was reliant upon solving the rental problem versus when I started my first company, I was trying to solve the commercial real estate loan problem. And that's okay. I'm just gonna take a call real fast. So we are a representative of what YC teaches you. We kind of had it instilled in us before we got into YC, which was, okay, it doesn't work. 60% of companies don't work. You figure that out. What's the pivot? And I'd say now, with all the success we have had, Rezi is currently my second company, the current company's fifth business model. And we are now trying to, for the third time, build out additional revenue streams. So even when you raise your seed or your A, it doesn't mean anything. You have to keep iterating the business to scale. And to scale the business means you keep having to solve problems for growth. The beauty of YC for us was, my co-founders probably will say the same thing, is no matter how small or how early you were, growth was the only mindset. So we were the company that 8 days in figured out our business model didn't work, and we pivoted. So the current business model of Rezi was birthed through YC. The way we make money now, the way we built the business now. So it was out of stress, it was out of creativity, but it was also out of just need. We too were in the first week gathering with all the other companies in our small batch. And Paul Buchheit, the creator of Gmail, Google employee like 24, looked at us and he said something similar. He was like, yeah, okay, cool, you're gonna pivot because it doesn't work. Let's figure out something new. And so we thought we got it. We're like, yeah, we figured it out. We know what we're gonna do. It's gonna be this. He was like, awesome, you're gonna guarantee rent for apartments. So how many you got? And we were like, we just came up with the idea because we just realized the other one didn't work. It was like, okay, so let's talk through it. You guarantee rent. You can get to 2 apartments when? And we were like, wait, 2 apartments? We just try to focus on 1. He's like, okay, well, if you get 1, how long will it take you to get 2? And once you get 2, how long will it take you to get 4? And once you get 4, how long will it take you to get 8? And we internalized what scared the shit out of us and eventually made it work. We went from 0 apartments week 2 to 14 by the time we got to demo day. And a lot of people probably would be like, oh, 14 units demo day, that doesn't really matter. You guys weren't that special. But we were making more than 10% returns on all 14. And I'd say 10 out of the 14 renewed with us for year 2. And then the real hockey stick moment happened after demo day because we raised our seed in the room and we went from 14 to 1,400 inside of 2 years.
That's crazy.
So all because we kept instilling in ourselves and living by the same sort of growth code that YC taught us. So, yep, we owe it to YC.
Can you tell us more about what Rezi is and what Rezi does?
Yeah, at this point, Rezi is entirely different than how we started. Today, Rezi is a platform that it's a 2-sided marketplace for rentals. We make the rental process expedited for tenants so they can rent an apartment in 5 minutes or less. And for landlords, we guarantee the rent. So an owner of any size multifamily will use Rezi for a bunch of reasons, but to keep it simple, I bought a building, I'm doing renovations. Because I'm putting in $30,000 per door, I don't want any vacancy. Rezi says, okay, landlord, you have 0 vacancy. I will lease all their units, take on all the risk of not collecting rent and a vacancy, and turn around and lease them up myself at a profit. And to the tenant, when you walk into a Rezi unit, you can apply, be approved or denied. But if approved, you can close from your phone. You can sign a lease with your finger and pay the rent and deposit with connecting your online banking to our payment processor.
That's awesome.
Yeah, soup to nuts. You can rent an apartment in 5 minutes for tenants, and hands down full coverage from all credit risk and vacancy loss for landlords. That's right.
I assume though Rezi has some way to know that this tenant will actually pay you, so you know you're not losing money.
Yeah. It took us 2 years to build sort of what we call Morpheus. We're huge fans of Matrix. And what Morpheus does is it analyzes 8 levels of due diligence in less than a second. So in about half a second, with just your name, social, and address, I can see every bit of financial data in your background, crunch it and compare it against your housing history. So not just if you went to court and got a judgment, but if you were taken to court, period, your employment history, your criminal history, OFAC checklist, if you're on a sex offenders list, income, credit, the entire kit and caboodle. Wow. We did this because it enabled us in a market that only told tenants you have to make 40 times rent and have some base camp FICO, which means nothing. We said, let's be different than what the market is. One FICO score is only representative of your propensity to pay. It's not actually your true credit quality. And most kids can hack it if you have wealthy parents with large credit lines, and they just add you to their SSN, your SSN to their credit cards. So for instance, a landlord in New York would see a kid who makes $100K fresh out of college working for Goldman Sachs with a 750 FICO. Rezi, in less than a second, would be able to say, oh, your FICO is false. There's no way possibly having $100,000 line of credit with income for the first time in 6 figures. You are on someone else's credit. We also would look at income and not just compare apples to apples, income gross versus someone else's income gross. We actually know what your net income is against your monthly debt obligations. So what your true DTI ratio is, i.e. if you make $100K, but you live check to check, we'll know that just as much as we know if your FICO is false. So arguably we democratized the renting process by taking away the bullshit rules. Sorry, didn't mean to curse. The BS rules of like 40 times rent, 750 FICO. And we created a model that makes it democratized because our units are first come, first serve, and our approval process is based on 8 layers of due diligence.
That's awesome. And just so you know, we don't have a lot of kids running property management companies listening to us. So
good.
You're okay on the cursing. Hopefully they're not playing this in the car.
No.
It'd be really boring for the kids anyway. It'll probably put them to sleep. So I'm kind of curious, like, how did you discover this problem in this space? Like, why pivot? Why did you pivot during YC toward this business model?
We got into YC with a business model that was much more akin to being a credit enhancement for landlords on tenant risk. So we were just backstopping applications. If the landlord said, I'll take a Rezi approved applicant, we were just guaranteeing that tenant wouldn't default. That model was very manual and required boots on the ground. My co-founders will laugh, but I was the one of the 3 of us that was like, no one should be left in New York City. Let's take everybody to YC. So it was the 3 of us co-founders and 3 of our first employees. No one was making money and we all lived in the same house. And then when we got to Silicon Valley, we were like, wait, we can't do the New York thing because no one's there. And that's where the initial pivot came from. But the thesis has always been the same. The thesis has always been, one, from an experience standpoint, why can't you rent an apartment as fast as you call it Uber? And 2, for landlords, why are brokers the only solution? Why is that incumbent even in existence? They don't take away any credit risk. No one ever has shared in a landlord's credit risk, not even arguably property managers, right? Because effectively they're paid a fee based on a rent roll to do certain tasks that are all post-decision, right? So if a tenant stops paying rent, the property managers that eat that loss, they just help with the eviction. If a broker puts leases up 5 units, and all the tenants actually had false credit reports, and they all were fraudulent, and they just held over, and they were like, I'm gonna stop paying rent, and I'm not leaving, take me to court. In New York City, that can take up to a year. That landlord doesn't go back to that broker and say, give me my fees back and cover this rent. That broker says, fuck no, I got paid because at least that was my job. And so this landlord in markets like New York has never had anyone to share with skin in the game. And that's the inception of Rezi. Can you marry this tenant experience on the leasing side with guaranteeing rent and actually taking off the plate the true pain point of landlords, which is lack of cash flow. And so the business model stabilizes cash flow at 100% and provides an instantaneous leasing experience for tenants.
Can you tell us like who your ideal customer is? Like who normally works with you?
Yeah. On the supply side, the landlords, it's really anyone that with assets that are 25 units or up. We started off with mom and pops, and we still will want to work with mom and pops, but at this current inflection point, because we have so much dry powder to deploy, 20 million exact to try to get the door before the end of the year, we want to work with semi to mid-size or even non-institutional funds. Pretty much if you touch a unit count above 100 units, we'll work with you. We recently just closed on a Danaway portfolio in East Harlem. So we now control 1,200 units for the next 6 years in Upper Manhattan. Those are the type of deals we love because we can throw out a lot of cash. But we'll also do something small. Someone just came to me with a 27-unit new development in the Bronx. And he's like, look, can you just take the lease out? It's a down the fairway rental. We're not going to make a ton of cash on it, but what we really want to do is save on the management expenses, right? I just want to kind of keep, will Rezi help me just have a porter and a super there? The answer is yes, entirely we will. Some landlords I need you to have a full stop solution. The credit risk is cool, but I want you also to help me on the repairs and maintenance side. Thus, a relationship with Natural. And that's how the partnership came together.
Right.
I don't know if I was supposed to disclose that.
Nah, no, we love it. Thank you for disclosing. I'm kind of curious, do you have any plans to go outside of New York right now, or are you really focused in there?
Yeah. We are currently live and still in San Francisco when we built the business in NYC. So a lot of our grandfather clients are still in the Valley. St. Louis, we have a large plot. Our biggest concentration is New York, but right now we're working vigorously to expand to Los Angeles and Seattle.
Cool.
Awesome.
Seattle, that's Lachel's hometown. That's where we were born.
Man, that's a coincidence, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm telling you, there's so many buildings in Seattle that would just love your service.
Yeah. For the last 3 years, Seattle has had more cranes than any other city in America.
I don't know if you knew this, but there's in Seattle, people joke that it's Crane City.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the official bird of Seattle.
It is the official bird of Seattle. Well said. Look, I think Seattle is a town that's in an inflection point where you have a ton of higher end employment moving in. You have headquarters or bigger offices for a lot of the Fortune 10 tech companies, Facebook, Google's, Apple's of the world that are moving in size. The new dev is being built to cater to a 6-figure and up earning tenant. And the city in and of itself has a pretty high per capita income ratio. So a lot of good things are happening. Obviously, it's a lot of supply, but other markets are taking the same bet. Downtown Brooklyn is another one where you have had in the last 36 months an influx of luxury that equates more luxury units in downtown Brooklyn than the entire borough in and of itself. Yeah. One neighborhood, more luxury units than the biggest borough in New York City.
Do you tend to focus on the units that are luxury? Or
no, I bring it up because eventually those landlords are going to have pain points. When the crunch happens, they're not going to be able to lease up. They can't write those losses down. The lender still wants their mortgage paid every month. And so they're going to need a solution to take out that risk. I'd say Rezi really is a sort of solution that varies per the landlord's needs. So if I'm a developer, new dev, you want to have leased up as fast as possible because you're trying to actively take out that construction debt. If I'm an owner operator that plays the rehab game, so I buy existing, but I just dump $30,000 to $50,000 a door in renos, so I can then lease it out for ridiculous premiums. Every day of vacancy hurts. Some guys who buy portfolios want to recapitalize. They just put a lot of equity into a recent deal. They want to take the equity off the table, and Rezi's guaranteed cash allows them to have that guaranteed recapitalization. And I think the fourth sort of food group really is New York specific, but the rent stabilization laws that just got passed, we're the only compliant platform that exists in the market for long-term rentals. And so a lot of landlords who are afraid of the word master lease look to Rezi because we have the ability to be your tenant, be on your rent roll in your yardie, or we can have a managing agreement still with a component of rent guarantee.
That's awesome. Okay.
So the real answer is we do A, B, and C units.
Right on. I'm kind of curious, it sounds like you start YC, you pivot. So you're starting from scratch. You get your first 14 coming out of demo day. You're at 1,400 now. You 100x in 2 years.
Yeah.
Were there a couple pieces of advice you got in YC that were most memorable to you as being part of what accelerated you?
Yeah, the most memorable would be do things that don't scale. The biggest thing we did that didn't scale was when we started the company, everyone wanted us to be a loss leader. So everyone was like, oh, just, make no profit or just lose money for the ability to say you got to 10,000 units. And we knew deep down in our hearts that doing that would make us an immediate target for failure, terrible acqui-hire, or just outright being an unscalable position. So from the door, we were being very methodical in the approach of how we underwrote the economics we gave to landlords in our overall structure. So such that even when we were conscious of our downside, we didn't actually tap our downside often. So we really were able to maximize on being smart and efficient and slow. So funny enough, the 2 years isn't like an even. Can you guys see me? Am I being choppy on the video?
We can see you just fine.
Okay. What I was going to say was the growth is pretty recent. So the hockey stick moment was the last 4 to 6 months. We did not grow evenly every single month, but we built a cachet and a rapport with owners who gave us 5 units, 10, 11, and then the follow-up deal was 500 or 1,000. And that's really what YC was about. Like it was about doubling, even if it was 5 to 10, 10 to 20, in preparation of that inevitable hockey stick moment.
Sounds like a lot of time spent earning trust early on, getting the basics right, so that you can feel massive growth later.
The validation point when it comes to landlords is a point rarely reached with a lot of platforms because they don't want to do it a new way. They've never had to. The existence of the business of real estate has always been built around some of these core constructs, like ridiculous rent rules for approval, relying on a human component to build trust and faith in a tenant, and just your entire risk profile is backed by a relationship versus actual technology and economics. So we just refuted all of that and really focused on execution, because if you can execute, your competitors that pay a premium eventually will lose their cachet because they're not sustainable. And landlords will pick up on that quick relative to their sensitivity of their balance sheet. And so as much as Rezi was an execution platform, we also were a consistent platform. And that's really what built the trust with landlords.
Were there any big hurdles you had in building that trust that you had to figure out?
Yeah, huge. We had to take on units that we didn't want. We had to pay prices that we didn't want. We had to hack solutions for, self-showings. I remember we were trying to use, I won't say the company's name because I think they're still in existence. But when we were at NYC, we didn't have a solution for self-showings. We were winter batch 2017. So if you think back to April of 2017, there weren't a lot of super mobile lockbox companies that allowed people to scan their ID and you control a dashboard and you have all this remote control access. You have a lot of them now for sure, but in early 2017, you had 5. And one of them in particular that we used in San Francisco, the lockboxes kept getting cut. So we kept losing keys. So one landlord eventually was like, you know what? If you lose my keys again, I'm never giving you any more business. And we had to, really do some hacky stuff. I was catching flights from New York to San Francisco on JetBlue to stay for certain periods of time to do block showings when a unit was about to turn, because we didn't have any staff out there. We moved the whole team back to New York City until we hired some staff and found some lockbox solutions. Eventually, we found a lockbox solution that worked, but it took us about to lose business to go through that process. We just didn't know.
Well, if your office is in New York and you're doing key drops in SF, that's definitely not scalable. Definitely doing things that don't scale.
Yeah, but it helped me become Mosaic on JetBlue, so now I have all the perks.
Perfect.
We're coming up on time, So if anyone wanted to reach out to you to learn more, what would be the best way for somebody to contact you?
Yeah, just shoot me an email, Keenan@rezi.co, KEENAN@REZI.co. Our website is rentrezi.com, so you also can email me at Keenan@rentrezi.com, whatever is your fancy. But I am readily available all the time, and would love to discuss anything related to leasing and property management with you guys.
Beautiful. We'll have to do a follow-up again when you're not jumping out of a meeting, running through the streets of New York, and we can see you in high res next time.
Yeah, my screen right now is frozen. I'm seeing a smile from like 8 minutes ago.
That's okay. Well, we can see you perfect. So
okay, good.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Keenan, for joining.
Thanks for having me.
I know you are rushing around, but we super appreciate it. We'll definitely book like a follow-up to have you on again at some point.
Yeah.
And everyone,
next month I'll be out there for demo day, so we definitely got to connect.
Oh,
well, I'll see you there because I'm going to be there too.
You're an alumni now. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's just like one of my prizes. I get to attend demo day and watch everyone else squirm on stage a little bit. So
I mean, Ethan, do you want to tell them how we connected, how we met?
Yeah. So for anyone that doesn't know, we talked about this earlier, but Latchel went through YC in W19, and the first time I met Keenan was at Latchel's demo day for the W19 batch. And I think we had connected over email, so I think we knew we had wanted to chat.
Yeah.
But I don't think you knew what I looked like. I had no idea what you looked like. And I think a couple times we just passed each other like on the floor, not realizing like who we were. And then we finally met each other. And actually, when I met you that day, that was after like hours being in this big hall. Because the way demo day was, it was like this giant space, and you basically had to shout to talk to someone like right in front of your face.
It's an old terminal.
Yeah. And like I already sound raspy, right? And this is my I'm talking in my normal voice right now, but when I met Keenan, my voice sounded like some crazy like monster trying to crawl out of my throat, probably. But yeah, awesome. Well, thanks, Keenan, for joining. And everyone that's listening, if you're interested in checking out Rezi, head to rentrezi.com. REZI.com. And if you're interested in learning more about Latchel, Keenan doesn't have to do this because he already went through this process. Head to latchel.com and click the book a demo button. We want to talk to you. Next week, we'll be talking with Aaron and Angela, founders of Moxie Property Management, about how they grew their company and how they run it fully remote. So make sure to join in next week and subscribe to the podcast for all the cool updates and whatever second interview we end up booking with you, Keenan, which hopefully we can get on the books for like September, October.
Let's do it. I'm down.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Keenan. You have a good one.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Same here.